Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Decaturish.com Twitch Show. I am your editor and host, Dan Wisenhunt, publisher of Decaturish.com, and today is our monthly episode about the economy. And here to talk to us about the economy are a business reporter and Decaturish contributor, Crystal Jarvis. Crystal, how are you?
Hello, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming back. And financial advisor Trey Bliss, who is also returning this month. Trey, how are you doing?
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us. So the way this works is we're going to talk amongst ourselves about economic news. If you are interested in joining in, please sign up for Twitch, sign up for an account, drop a comment or two in there, and we'll try to get to those. So Trey, right out of the gate, I want to ask you, what are you hearing about the possibility of another stimulus happening? I read some stuff on CNBC today. It looked like people are finally starting to get off their butt a little bit about this and make something happen, make a deal happen. But I'm getting lost in the specifics. I'm hearing they want to keep the unemployment rate at 600, but Republicans only want to do $400 a week or something like that. So, what are you hearing? What are you seeing about this?
So you've got three different narratives going on. The GOP and McConnell have gone from 200, which they were originally asking for, up to 400. Pelosi is still staying at 600, that what they want, and increased aid to state and local governments. The news just in the last hour is that Meadows from the GOP is saying if we don't have a deal by Friday, we're not going to make a deal. So Pelosi said that she's optimistic that a deal will be reached, and then reporting today that Trump is threatening to do it all by executive action and lock out the Democrats from any part of the negotiation.
I'm not
And
sure that he can do that.
well, he can't. Taxation. So he also wants to include the payroll tax cut by executive order. What they're trying to, the way that the administration is trying to say that they can do it by themselves is that funds were already appropriated that haven't been spent, and try and move all of that around so they can get around but essentially, yes, they cannot do that without Congress, that you cannot then do spending and things like that by executive order.
Yeah.
But that hasn't stopped the president before from trying to do something that is unconstitutional.
Right.
I do think a deal will get passed. The key will be so kind of the two markers. Friday morning is the unemployment report. The ADP report this morning, which tracks, ADP is the largest private payroll company that big and small businesses use ADP to run payrolls. And they were expecting job gains of about 1.8 million jobs across the country. It came in at 167,000, which is much slower than what was expected. And the number Friday will be important because if you do not see another 2 million or 3 million jobs created, as the president has been talking about, and there's even whisper numbers that we might actually see a job loss this month, that would speed along negotiations because I think they start to get, politicians work best when you start to see markets in a panic. Right now, the market seems to be going up every day. So there's no incentive for them to really be forced to do anything. Mm-hmm. You see a jobs loss for the month of July in this Friday report, you're going to likely see negotiations pick up at that very last hour. Mm-hmm. I saw today that Harry Reid, Mitch McConnell said that the Senate will be in session next week and they are not going on their vacation for the full month. So they will be in session. So again, that increases that even if something isn't done Friday, you've probably got negotiations going on to next week. But so far, there's no real progress at all.
So who holds the cards in this situation? Does the president hold the cards? Does the Democratic House hold the cards? Who has the most leverage in this negotiation?
Well, I would say that, again, going to use the 2008 example, Pelosi has the most leverage because you're going into a presidential election If you remember back in September when they were trying to get TARP done in '08, they canceled the presidential campaign at the time to come back and try and pass the emergency legislation. It's the same type of situation here, that the buck stops with the president, and the longer you go without the stimulus, the worse the economy is going to get, which makes re-election much tougher. So you can have the Republicans talking tough about what they think is the Democrats are saying, oh, that they're being obstructionist. But eventually, if you want to get something passed, you're going to have to make a deal with Pelosi. And right now, she said, we aren't budging on anything.
Or gather people in your living room and point a gun at them. So, are both sides negotiating in good faith here, Trey?
I think at this point, yes, in accordance with how they kind of believe again, if you would have told me in January that we would have spent $4 trillion to add to the deficit this year, I would have said you're insane. That's what we're looking like we've already done. So you do have Republicans saying, all right, we can't keep adding, either Rand Paul's, people like that saying, Ted Cruz's, we can't keep just adding to the deficit. But again, at this point, it's not traditional stimulus that we're talking about, because the economy, it's in a point, this is actual support for people that have been forced to quit their jobs. So it's not your typical Washington bill to where, okay, this is stimulus for the economy. This is actually support so that you don't have people getting, again, the foreclosure moratorium is one of the other sticking points that in Friday, New York City, that ends, and you could have 15,000 people evicted next week in New York City.
Yeah.
I want to.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to ask in terms of. I'm curious to know from you as a financial advisor, the thought process of the argument that they're having about the $600 versus the $400, and I've heard it be as low as $200 in additional unemployment money during this time. Like, my question to you is, what is kind of the thought process on how do you feel about that decision-making that decision-making process, the numbers that they're throwing around, and should they be lowering the amount based on what we know it could be detrimental if people don't get it right now?
So at this point, it's going to be very difficult to take the $600 down to any level.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of our last month when we talked, I had mentioned at the very end, I think, that we were talking about called the special K recovery. It's a K to where the people that were doing okay before, they're going to recover much better. The people at the bottom end of the spectrum, the bottom just falls out, and who knows if they're able to recover.
Right.
To answer the question in a different way, 55% of everybody with a college degree has been able to work from home. Mm-hmm. 0.5% of people without a high school diploma have been able to work from home. And when the economy is shut down, you're not able to work. When you're looking at mortgage or rent delinquencies to where there's no forgiveness, you're still accruing that rent, so that it might be 3 or 4 months. How is somebody that is just living on government support going to be able next week to come up with $5,000 to pay their rent that they're behind on?
Right.
It has to extend. I mean, it's whether you like it or not, or if you want to then be looking at a situation like the 1930s, where you have soup lines and homeless shelters being overrun and tent cities. I mean, that is right now the only option until we're able to get the economy kind of back on its feet, and you're not worried about outbreaks. You can get back to more than 25 or 50% capacity at a restaurant. Until we're able to have all of the economy fully reopened, there's going to have to be some sort of government support. And again, I hate what this is doing. This is going to have decade-long ramifications of raising the deficit at this point. But the other option is the 1930s.
Right. Right. I agree with that. 100%. And I think that, I mean, I think the last time when we spoke to you, it was kind of like I got off the phone feeling depressed a little. Um, but you were telling us based on, if nothing happens, what could happen and what we could see. And I do think that I agree with all those things. I do think those things could happen. I spoke to an economics professor recently for a story that I was working on regarding the economy. And he basically said that the biggest issue is that no, they're not really handling the underlying problem to kind of basically plug up to stop. Basically, if you handle the coronavirus, then things will kind of slowly come back together. But since that's really not the case, this could kind of continue on and on because more people will get sick. We're talking about bringing kids back into the schools. So there's so many barriers, the financial things that are happening, but the main thing that could actually stop all of this or kind of help us move forward is solving the problem, which is something that we're not doing at all.
One of the interesting things is that go back 12 months ago in the Democratic primaries and the Andrew Yang people, that universal basic income, that you get a stipend each month from the government. And people on both sides were saying, that's such a crazy idea. This will never work. How can we do this? How can we afford it? Well, this is what we've been doing the last 4 months, whether we want to admit it, that it's Andrew Yang type policies or not. The hardest thing, an old LBJ quote, is that the hardest thing to start doing is once you have a social program that becomes embedded in the system, it's very hard to take that away. And that's going to be the other issue, that if we have unemployment staying around this 10% level for an extended period, it's going to be very hard to tell people that, again, because it's essentially still the government response has not been adequate in bringing us to where other countries across the developed world are at. So it's going to be very hard to take that away. One other kind of, I hate to say silly, but unintended consequence. So when you look at the GDP report, we had the minus 32.9% number, which is somewhat, again, I will agree with Trump in this regard, it's somewhat misleading, but because you're talking about annualized terms of such big numbers. But personal income went up 7% in that quarter. All of this is taxable. So all of these benefits, so the government is counting this as increased income that people are receiving. And the tax bills that people have when they come to pay taxes next year on all of this benefit money that they actually owe taxes on it, you're going to have another hit of people that fall behind to the IRS.
Right.
Just this accumulating gap of people are spending the money right now on food and necessities and things like that just to stay afloat. You're going to have rents that are accumulating that people are behind on. You're going to have a tax bill that most people probably don't know that all of these benefits that they're receiving are taxable. And this is income, not just free money that's being handed out that you're going to have to pay taxes.
Right.
The PPP loan was free money, but that's a wholly different.
Well, but it might bump a lot of people up. So with that extra $600 a week, if you annualize it out, that's $30,000 a year in extra benefits, to where people might be put into a tax bracket that they've never experienced before, where they're
exactly. And then that means that their actual income taxes for that following year is going to be far lower than what it was before. And that same additional funds that they actually look forward to and need, they're not going to get as much.
Thinking they're getting a refund because they've always gotten a refund, and then they find out $3,000 in addition to the rent that they're behind. And there's all of these kind of unintended consequences that we're figuring out week by week. I mean, every time you think you have a question answered, there's 3 more questions that then kind of pop up. and it just becomes this large tree of situations and scenarios that it's hard to get overly optimistic kind of with what the stock market is doing with the NASDAQ at all-time highs. I mean, that's a whole nother situation to get into, but kind of longer term consequences, at some point you will have to deal with inflation. You just can't print money out of thin air and expect everything to be the same for, again, it might be a decade that it takes to build up, but it becomes problematic, especially when the government needs to be borrowing this extreme amount of money.
So if you're just joining us, this is the Decaturish.com Twitch Show. I'm your host, editor, and publisher, Dan Wisenhunt. Our guests today are Crystal Jarvis, who's a business journalist, and we have financial advisor Trey Bliss. If you are one of the 4 people watching us right now, do me a favor, signal boost us, please. We're doing good content. Now I got 6 now. If you're one of the 6 people watching us, do us a favor, please, and signal boost us. Throw this link up on the Twitter. Throw this link up on your Facebook. Hey, Stout327, and let's join in, because we're doing a good show here. We're putting out good content. People should see it. So Trey, I have content. Trey, I have a question, and I'm going to play the devil's advocate, which often means sounding, I hate to say it, sounding like a Republican. But does the tax benefit that we're talking about, this government benefit, provide a disincentive for people to work?
At this point, so the study from Yale came out yesterday, and it said no, it does not.
Okay.
You then had all of your GOP talking head economists, Brian Westbury, Stephen Moores. Well, that's a ridiculous study. But so far, the evidence has shown that it has not been a disincentive, that people want to get back working because you know that this benefit is not going to be there forever. Most Americans that are working are not that short-sighted to where they're thinking that extra $600 a week is worth their job or their career or their security for the next 2, 3, 4 years. That's essentially kind of what I view also, that there's going to be a small percentage, yes, that don't want to go back to work and will continue taking the money. But that's a far smaller percentage than the overall amount of people that realize I need to get back. If my company is hiring again and they've reopened, I need to get back to work, because do you think in 9 months from now, they're still going to be giving out these type of benefits? I mean, it annualizes out that it's about $1.2 to $1.5 trillion per year that we're spending on these unemployment benefits, these extended unemployment benefits. And when we, for years, can't pass an $800 billion or $1 trillion infrastructure bill that we've been talking about for the last decade because it was too expensive, they're not going to continue a $1 to $1.5 trillion unemployment benefits package year after year.
Doesn't this kind of lay bare a lot of the conservative arguments, though, about the deficit? The fact that they're willing, like, in an emergency, all that shit goes right out the window. You know, we gotta save the country. I mean, you know, when the shit really hits the fan, and the country's in trouble, all of a sudden they print all the money they want to. You know what I mean? So doesn't that kind of just pull the rug off of that whole argument of that? You know, deficits. I mean, yeah, deficits ain't great, but you know, having people homeless in the streets ain't great either. I mean,
it goes back to the Reagan type argument that you run up all of these deficits to fight the Cold War. Mm-hmm. Was that really worth it? And then you're saying, oh, well, we're fiscally conservative. Again, you say you're fiscally conservative, but you're then blowing the deficit picture completely out of the water.
Right. Well, they'll spend money on what they want to spend money on. I mean, but it's when it's talking about stuff like healthcare, you know, stuff that could really fix the underlying structural issues that are driving so much of this. You know, what the pandemic has really done is reminded us of all the things that made America not great. You know, our shitty healthcare system ain't great. The fact that, you know, a disruption of this sort means how many millions of people are we talking about potentially being evicted? I heard something like 40. I mean, it's a lot. It ain't a number to sneeze at. The fact that we are still have this many people living paycheck to paycheck for one reason or another. I wonder if I do wonder, after 6 months, 7 months of this, if our expectations are going to change about what the government should be doing for us, because when it's time to save the president and help him get reelected, all of a sudden they can do whatever they want. And then how is that going to look, a year from now when the Democrats potentially could be elected and they're trying to improve health care? And they're going to face the deficit this and the deficit that. Well, I mean, look at what they just did. I mean,
And then, and I don't like to be too partisan either way, because mostly political, I'm pretty much down the middle. But you're going to have higher taxes to pay for this. I mean, there's no question about it, whether it's personal taxes, corporate taxes. I mean, taxes are going to have to go up, which will slow economic growth. But you can't, you just can't keep pretending the old saying, it doesn't matter until it does. And that's what we're dealing with, deficits. And there'll be a day, you're already seeing it now with some very smart people suggesting that the dollar is at risk of being the reserve currency in the world, meaning that everything is basically traded and priced in US dollars, that the world is losing faith in the US dollar. That's why you've seen this incredible rally in gold over the last 3-4 months. There's just so many different questions that credit down. They put the United States credit rating on negative launch. We're still AAA by Fitch. I think we were downgraded years ago by S&P to AA+. But if we're no longer a AAA credit nation, how does this then all flow through the rest of kind of the global financial system, the global trade? All of these things that the rest of the world bases everything else on what's going on in our bond markets, our treasury markets, our currency markets. They're pegged to what we're doing. And if the rest of the world loses faith in what we're doing, we have serious issues.
Well, I would argue that they're got plenty of reason to have lost faith in what we're doing. We have the president is basically, and I'm sorry, y'all. I know there's this whole perception that you have to lie about stuff to appear objective, but my job is to tell you the truth, and the truth is this: the president is making foreign policy based on transactional relationships, where basically he's asking these countries to do things to benefit him personally or politically in some way, in exchange for some benefit that he can give them. That's why he got impeached in the first place, was because he was trying to get interference in the election against Joe Biden. Speaking of Joe Biden, Trey, what do the markets think about a Biden presidency and a Democratic sweep? Because I hear a lot of talk about, the economy's going to tank. Well, it's got nowhere else to go, I guess. But what are you hearing? What is your sense of how they will react if Trump loses and there's a Democratic sweep of the Senate and they keep the House?
So that thought process has changed dramatically over the last 3 or 4 months. Pre-COVID, it would have been, okay, prepare for more regulation, higher taxes, markets are going to go down. Given what we'll call the inadequate response to this pandemic, I think the markets want leadership. They want predictability. They want not being affected by 50 retweets that might come at you, or 50 tweets that might come at you from 10 in the morning or 10 in the evening to 7 in the morning of just this constant barrage. So I don't think markets would you'll have a small knee jerk down. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But I think at this point, markets are already pricing in that, okay, we have more certainty about what policy is going to be. We're going to repair trade relationships with Europe. We're going to, again, still maybe be tough on the Chinese, but it's not then just this situation. We're not going to be talking about a deal with North Korea and just all of the nonsense that we have been experiencing the last 3.5 years, it becomes stable. It becomes boring, which markets love certainty and boringness.
Yes, I would appreciate some of that as well. I would like to not know what my president is thinking every 5 minutes. I really don't care. I'd prefer they just, did their job and
Go
not work.
back to, I don't know if you saw his press conference yesterday. Again, in my line of work, I have to watch these every day. But he was talking about 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago when he announced the Kodak deal, to where Kodak, the film company, was going to get a $750 million loan from the government to move from doing film development with their chemicals to become a player in the supply chain of making pharmaceuticals. Who knows whether this will actually work, but the Trump administration announced the deal. Well, now the SEC is investigating because the CEO of the company, the day before the announcement came in, gave himself a stock grant that was worth about $25 million the day after it was announced. So they're getting investigated. Yesterday, so Trump, who 2 weeks ago was touting the deal, now saying, I had no part of that deal.
Yeah, every time I read this stuff, it's like dumb crook news. Like, not only are there grifters, but they're just extraordinarily bad at it. Like, they're just transparently so awful.
Well, how do you, again, the extortion of having them sell TikTok to Microsoft? How do you tell a company, we will shut you down by September 15th? But if Microsoft is allowed to buy you, and if Microsoft buys you, you need to then give a percentage of that money to the U.S. Treasury because we're facilitating the transaction. It's like a finder's fee.
God.
The markets, again, if Obama had done anything remotely,
they would run him out of town on a rail. I mean, he would have been impeached for way less than this. So much less.
Is it legal then for the government to then, I mean, it's essentially extortion to say, we'll shut you down, pay us, and you can then be bought by Microsoft.
Well, who doesn't want to be bought by Microsoft? Buy us.
Well, the biggest question that I had with that whole situation was, could he actually do that? Shut down TikTok. So then, from going to read about it, basically, is it him being able to shut it down due to it being a security risk that they have been saying that TikTok imposes? Yeah. So, because I was thinking, like, could you really just go and shut down a business? Just because.
Back in the early 2000s, a Chinese oil company was trying to buy, I can't remember which, just blanked on the name of the company, but trying to buy a major U.S. oil company. And the deal was approved, and at the last minute, they rejected it for national security concerns because they didn't want the Chinese to own one of the 5 biggest oil companies in the U.S. So that, yes, they have the ability to then say, all right, we're shutting this down because of national security.
But then does it become, again, like Dan mentioned, he does a lot of things based on how it benefits him and how it doesn't. And you have to think about the fact that these kids on TikTok went and completely shut down his convention that he had in Tulsa. By pretending that they were signing up to buy tickets to the convention where he thought he was having this astronomical amount of people coming, and then they all didn't show up. That happened on TikTok. So then, of course, you have to question his actual pure motives as to why you're shutting it down.
And then there's the comedian who constantly mocks his ass on... I'll forget her name, but she's wonderful.
The woman,
yeah.
She's awesome.
Woman, yeah. She just nails that to the wall. Okay, so if you are, it does seem like ages ago. Also, Embry Replicant says, how did he say it? Yosemite. How did he say it? Yosemite. Moving on. If you are watching this is the Decaturish.com Twitch Show. I'm your host, editor, and publisher Dan Wisenhunt. Our guests are business journalist Crystal Jarvis and financial advisor Trey Bliss. if you have a question, give us a follow on Twitch. Get into our messages and shoot us a question. We'd love to talk to you, love to chat with you about what's going on. If you're one of the 7 people watching us right now, do us a favor. Give us a signal boost. Get on Facebook. Say, hey, I'm watching this great Twitch show. Or get on the Twitters or TikTok or whatever. And let people know what we're doing. Because this is a quality show. This is good stuff. All right, so let's talk about local business for a minute, Trey, if you don't mind. Do you have opinions about local business?
I do.
I wanted to talk first about this wonderful story Crystal did about the pandemic pivot and how companies are having to sort of reinvent themselves to survive. And Crystal, can you kind of give us the quick version of that and how you reported that?
Absolutely. So one of the things I wanted to do, because I heard that a lot of companies have had to get creative in order to stay afloat. Really, honestly, not even necessarily afloat, but in order to um, get money coming in, because their business models and the things that they may have been selling, or a lot of them depended on their storefronts to bring in funds. They had to completely revamp how they did things. Some of them had to move to do business online, to really revamp their online presence. Um, I remember Steve Cars, who runs King of Pops. He basically, I mean, going to these major outings and events that we have across the city, that's how he made his money. As you know, a lot of those have canceled. So, then they had to kind of get completely creative with how they did things. And a number of those businesses actually are completely different markets now. To really, a lot of them said not necessarily just to kind of keep money coming in the door, not necessarily that it's actually garnering as much money as it was pre-COVID, but really just kind of keeping their doors open.
Yeah, and there were a couple of other interesting stories that you had in there as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, there was another a company that was a major. They did a lot of marketing. They created like all of the marketing items that you would see, like backdrops and different marketing materials that you would see at events, at conferences and events, business conferences and events that businesses do, to where businesses would pay 20 grand for one marketing product. He is now using those items, the same materials that were used to make those backdrops and those things. He's using those to make masks and sell those. And he's also using them because a lot of businesses are now trying to protect their workers. He's using them to create the plexiglass barriers that you see now when you go into the grocery stores, and maybe at different hair salons. I'm not sure how that works for nail salons, but he mentioned a couple of different operations, and now possibly trying to sell them to schools as well, as they try to navigate and figure out how to social distance in certain settings. You had some companies that definitely a lot of mask making was happening. Some companies that have now allowed their women who have sewing abilities could sew from home, because of course, women now have to take care of their kids and still make a living. So there was a lot of different pivoting examples within that story. And I found it very interesting that some of them were doing something completely opposite from what they started their business doing, or to kind of stay afloat. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, I had to pivot my business model to one where I didn't do work to one where I actually had to do work, which was that was interesting. It was new for me.
Wow, Dan.
Not used to doing it. Trey, in all seriousness, I think creative and entrepreneurial type people seem to be doing better in this environment, and I don't know if that's just because they're used to rolling with the punches, they're a little more flexible, but I see a lot of people who are resourceful doing okay. I don't know if that's your opinion of it as well, but I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
And that's, I guess, kind of the optimistic side of this all, is that it's going to create a tremendous opportunity for people that are thinking 6, 12, 18, 24 months ahead of how do I, again, you're going to have a lot, it's depressing the number of businesses that have already closed and that will continue to close. But in that place, how do you then operate a sports bar in a socially distant environment? Or how do you, whether it's next year, I don't know if we'll have football this year or not, we'll see. But if you're able to then run a sports bar for next year and we're still dealing with whether a vaccine or something with the virus, people that are thinking out 6, 12, 18 months of how to be opening up these businesses now, there's going to be a tremendous opportunity for that to really ramp up. You're going to have very cheap real estate in a lot of these shopping centers and places that are where commercial real estate is going to be open. So there's going to be incentives. I'm sure the small SBA, with the same way that they were doing PPP loans to keep people in business, you're going to see that same type of incentive for people that are unemployed or have lost their job to start their own small businesses or get a second shot at doing that. So again, I expect that ultimately, and that's why I don't think if we do the right things now, this doesn't end up being like the 30s, that you don't have the extended 10-year just complete crash of the economy. But you've got to start making these decisions over the next 3 or 6 months. Again, painful decisions, but things that have to be done so that 2022, 2023, that as you're on the other side of this, you're seeing real opportunity in the economy, which again, I still am optimistic that that will be there, as frustrating and as crazy as all this stuff is.
I want to say about sports, first of all, roll tide. Second of all, I have a real problem with some of the leaders in the Southeastern Conference and other leagues basically telling amateur athletes who aren't getting paid to suck it up and deal with it. I don't have a problem with professional athletes choosing to take that risk, as you know, because they're getting paid. That's their life. That's their choice. I got a real problem with people within the SEC and other leagues that make millions of dollars a year off free labor, telling that free labor to just suck it up, not worry about it.
That's the issue, is that there's so much money at stake.
Right.
That, I mean, you look at a company, ESPN and Disney, which is the parent, you're talking about $1 billion of ad revenues lost if there's no college football.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of money that these sports generate, not just for the universities, but think across, again, ESPN and Disney, or CBS and Viacom with the game of the week. The ad money that could be lost is very important to these companies' bottom lines. That fuels that incentive to have this happening, whether or not it's the right decision or not. The dollar is an important factor in that decision tree.
Yeah, I'm sure CBS lost its ass on March Madness. I mean, I think that's the most lucrative sports contract out there, really, because you just got so many games. Yeah, I mean, I hate it, but, you know, I don't think that amateur athletes should be, you know, cannon fodder just so somebody else can. I don't know. Like I said, I'm gonna have a real I'm gonna have a real problem watching amateur athletics under those conditions.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think that they definitely made some leeway in that, because they did finally kind of say that, you know, some of the athletes working can, you know, now start to benefit off of their name and their own brand. But they definitely have a longer way to go in terms of them being paid, or, you know, receiving some type of compensation, especially like you said, based on all of them that are on the fields or forced to be on the fields are not getting any type of scholarship funding, are not getting any type of incentives outside of just, you know, exposure for playing the game and possibly entering the professional league. But I do agree. I think that it's going to be very hard to see them kind of take advantage of people. But I'm to the point to where I'm having a hard time grasping how our people's health is now being put at risk for money. And I guess I realize that historically this has been the case.
Right.
So it's not going to
Yeah.
stop now, So when research was kind of done about, and I had been curious, like some of the things, what happened during the 1918 flu, Spanish flu. Um, there was some of the same responses that we're having today. So,
Well, and
so
there
that
are
is that.
pictures of that time of baseball players wearing masks playing
Mhm,
professional baseball games at that time. That
right, and
the other thing was the 1918, 1919 flu. Um, that was something that was key in ending World War One. That you ran out of, again, you think of trench warfare,
right.
that was just get up,
Mhm,
march over, we'll mow you down with machine guns, and you're fighting trench by trench. The uh, death rate, especially among the Germans, was very high, that they started running out of people to keep running out and marching from these trenches. I mean, that was one of the biggest things
mhm,
that brought the war to an end. There are many other factors,
mhm.
but that is one of the important factors that was a part of it.
Right.
So
And
again,
that was a part of the wave too that actually ended up happening, where more and more people got sick because it was spreading through the soldiers as well. But Woodrow Wilson's response was pretty much the same as Trump's response was. He was holding conventions, encouraging large mass gatherings. It was just amazing to kind of see that, 100 years later, we pretty much repeated the same response to the pandemic that we had 102 years ago. So that's amazing. So I think it's definitely something that shows you that it is a societal problem compared to how some other countries have been able to deal with um, this situation. Even the whole mask wearing thing that was the same. The whole, it's unconstitutional, people should make us do that. Same exact arguments back then as well.
I
So
think
well,
that was also
I think it's also
amazing.
a function of the reality that people who generally has historically held power in this country have a social status where they're insulated from most of the consequences of doing things like that.
Hmm.
Whereas they don't
Hmm.
give a shit about the rest of us. I mean,
Oh no,
they
no.
look at us the same way that the SEC looks at college athletes. It's just they don't give a shit.
A
I mean,
means
they don't care.
basically.
They
Yeah,
got
a
health
meme.
care. They've
Right.
got all the sandy wipes they need. I mean, they don't care about us. I mean, that's
No. Yeah.
and that's been that way. I'm sorry, Trey, I cut you off. My
I was
bad.
going to say, that's why, I mean, the Mark Twain quote rings true, that history doesn't necessarily repeat, but it usually rhymes, meaning that's why 100 years later, the lessons aren't really learned.
So,
No.
moving on to it's 6:45. We got a few other topics we want to cover. If you are watching us and you want to ask a question, now's a good time to do it. If you are watching us and you think we're worth sharing with other people, share us. Like, let people know what you're doing. Tweet about us, put us on Facebook, what have you. Trey, so Emory University last week announced that they're going to give everyone a pay cut who's making $75,000 or more a year. I want to say that is, oh darn, I had that. Um, Basically the pay cut is going to apply to, I think it's 5%. Let me read it. Emory University has made the necessary decision to implement a temporary compensation reduction for all regular employees, staff earning. This is a 5% reduction. Okay. So that's big economic news here because a lot of our readers uh, work at Emory, are employed or connected to Emory in some way. What effect does that have on the local economy, if any? I mean, 5% doesn't sound like a lot, especially if you're making that kind of money. But
That's disposable income.
what now?
That becomes your disposable income.
Right.
That things
Yeah.
that, instead of buying uh, steaks, you might do burgers, or instead of going out to, I mean, we're not really going out to eat, or at least most people I know aren't going out to eat. So you cut that out. Or, I mean, again, just disposable income, the type of stuff that really spurs the economy. And again, that's
Right.
why when you have these recessions, it becomes something that becomes self-reinforcing, that Okay, that 5% cut that they do, that means that the person that's maybe running the restaurant, okay, well, they have less people coming in. And again, that brings me to something that, I mean, I had as an issue. If you get bored one day, go, or if you're watching along with us and you want to play at home, Google M2 velocity of money. And I don't know if you remember what M2 velocity of money is from your Econ 101 class.
I will Google it right now. M2 velocity money.
Velocity of money. And we're basically at the lowest level since this data has been tracked into the 1950s. Just click on the link of the St. Louis Fed. That should be the first thing. That, but what this measures is how much money is coming into the economy and how many times does it travel between hands. So the example I use is that, Dan, if I buy something from you for $100, you have $100 in your pocket. And then you take $50 of that and buy something from Crystal. And Crystal then takes 25 of that and then buys something from me. And then I take 10 of that and buy something from you. That $100 is circulated $180 worth. So that's when you look at that chart, most of history, we've been at about 1.8 times. So each dollar circulates 1.8 times. What you're seeing now is that we're less than 1.1, meaning that I give you $100, you're only taking 10 of that and spending it. And then the buck stops there and it's not then being recirculated. And that becomes very dangerous.
Crystal's showing it. Crystal, you got to say something.
I'm sure, yes, it's like a significant, can you hear me? It's
talking.
like a significant drop if you look. It's a significant drop if you look right here to the,
part of that
where you see 2020.
Yep. So part of that is because the Fed put $4 trillion into the banking system, but that money is then going into the banks, which aren't doing anything, or money's coming into my pocket. And because there's nothing, I can't go on vacation right now. I don't want to fly. I'm just taking any money I have and sitting on it or paying down debt, which isn't recirculating money. But that's, again, how it becomes self-reinforcing in the economy. And that's one of the more important things that I look at. And again, that's not going to turn on a dime when you see that trend of how it's basically been dropping for the last 5 or 6 years, and then the steep drop of what we've seen. But you need to see money, then the money I'm giving to you, then spending to somebody else. To bring it back to your Emory story, that 5% pay cut, that's going to drop, again, the velocity of money, that disposable income that you're spending at another business. Well, they're having cuts at that business, so they're spending less on supplies. And again, that's why I think this recession will be a lot longer than just the 3-month COVID period that right now what people are expecting.
I think even if I did the math just because I was curious, so basically for someone who is making 75 grand, that 5% is around $3,000. I know you're the math guys, right? So, and then that you're talking about all of that before taxes. So even once it's taxed, that's going to be even less money that actually comes in to the household, just if you're looking at the baseline of, at someone who's making 75.
Then $300 less a month that you have. And if you can survive with $300 less, but what are you going to then cut? Do I take my cable package from, maybe I had HBO and I say no, or I don't want to pay my $15 to Netflix or whatever, 17, or do I cancel my satellite radio for $20? Do I not get my morning cup of $7 coffee and I'll make it at home? Or, I mean, all of the different things. How do you then narrow that $300 a month in your spending patterns?
So we got some reader questions.
And some of that.
Okay,
go ahead. No, go ahead, Dan.
Okay. So Stout327 asks, without contact tracing and sufficient testing, how will consumer demand return? How will the economy strengthen if we don't attack the issue at the source, i.e. actually responding to the pandemic? That's a good question.
So what is then rely on is pent-up demand, that you have to, the contraction will be much sharper that you see in the economy. I mean, right now, you're what I call the two elements that are battling each other. It's the Federal Reserve pumping in $4 trillion and the Treasury, basically Congress and the government, pumping in 3 to 4 trillion. So you have $8 trillion that's been dumped into the economy over the last 4 months. Remember, we're a $20 trillion a year economy. So this is, I mean, more than almost half of the economy is being stimulus or support, whatever, transfer payments, versus the disease, which again, we aren't getting a good grasp of. The whole point of the shutdown was so by right now we would be back to normal. You can't even debate that this is not normal, and you can debate whether or not a second lockdown is warranted at this point.
Yeah.
And then kind of the recession that becomes just blanked on the word, but self-reinforcing, that how you then get consumer spending back is that your car turns 10 years old and it breaks down and you have no decision but buying a new car. You've put off purchasing something for so long. My refrigerator just broke that I've had 12 years. Like they used to last 30, now they last 12. So I'm forced to then make a purchase. It's going to rely more on pent-up demand than actual spending trends. And again, that will then build and you'll see a depressed consumer. I mean, right now we haven't seen a depressed consumer because of the stimulus money or the transfer payments, the unemployment payments that have gone out, that 1.2 trillion in increased unemployment benefits. When that ends, you're going to have and that's why when I talk to most people, aside from being locked up, it doesn't feel like we're in this deep recession, that this is the worst since the Great Depression. I mean, nobody around us is, I don't see soup lines, and it doesn't feel like when you talk to friends or neighbors or people that everybody feels like, oh, this is like 1931. It feels fairly normal to most people.
Right.
Again, even if you don't have your job because you're getting benefits, it's not like you're completely out on the street at this point. That point might be coming if we, again, going back to what we talked at the top of the show, that point might be coming in 2 weeks, 2 months. But right now, it doesn't feel like this is the end of the world type apocalyptic economic scenario, which when you look at the data, down 32.9%, down 9% quarter over quarter. I mean, this is the worst we've had since the 1930s.
So, that's a lot. So
yeah,
want to switch gears a little bit to a little more local. So, Trey, do you remember where that Brewster's was on Lawrenceville Highway? It was over there by North DeKalb Mall. They closed that thing. It was there for 20 years. I was never a huge fan of Brewster's. Maybe that was part of the problem, but they closed. Now a year later, they're going to turn it into a Dunkin' Donuts and a Baskin Robbins. And somebody on our Decaturish Facebook page said, well, that's weird. They're closing a lot of Dunkin' Donuts around the country, so why are they opening a new one? But then I saw this really cool CNBC article about how a lot of restaurants are focusing on drive-thrus, which is what this is going to be. So there's yet another example of this sort of reinvention in the market where people are like, well, nobody's going to come into Starbucks anymore. Nobody's going to come into Mickey D's, so we're going to get this Dunkin' Donut. And I don't know. I don't have the info in front of me about which Dunkin' Donuts are closing, but I would suspect some of them are the ones that don't have drive-thrus and can't monetize it in that way, but I'm not entirely sure.
High-density downtown areas where if you don't have people working in office towers, so let's say you have a Dunkin' at the base of, was it Colony Square or one of the places around there that there's if I have a 20-story office tower and now you don't have anybody in there, why am I going to keep this open?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, wish Dunkin' Donuts well. I assume they'll be fine. People do like donuts, so it's not a bad market to be in. Perk Coffee Roasters is going to open at the Hosea and Second Development. I'm sorry, Crystal.
No, their donuts is really not why we buy.
What do you go to Dunkin' Donuts for?
Donuts for their donuts. Their coffee. Their donuts
coffee.
are awful.
Yeah, their donuts are bad. they're objectively
Okay.
not
Okay, come
bad.
on. You're a Southerner. I'm sure you think Krispy Kreme is much
Krispy
better
Kreme is
than
better.
Dunkin's. And their name isn't actually Dunkin' Donuts anymore. It's just Dunkin', which thankfully I'm glad they dropped donuts because
They ain't
when I
doing.
moved up north, I didn't understand why they were even touting their donuts because they were
I
so
mean,
bad.
the
But yeah,
benefit of Dunkin' Donuts to me is, it's
Mhm.
12 o'clock, and you want a half defrosted breakfast sandwich. Where do you go? I mean, Dunkin' Donuts is there
Well,
for you. They're willing to take that
true.
sandwich and pop it in the microwave for you and hand it to you through the drive-through and make your day
And
better.
I actually went there today, just
Oh,
today. But
Dunkin'
I'll
Donuts.
also
If you're one of
add,
the 6 people, we need sponsors, so let us
right?
know.
I'll also add to that though that you have a lot of companies, as Trey was kind of saying, that some of those places that may be closing strategically for them, maybe in some of those areas where you have the Googles of the world, the Twitter of the world, who are literally saying that people can work from home indefinitely. So it might actually change some of how they do business there. So
Alex Brown is making fun of me. She put "I wish Dunkin' Donuts well" in quotes. I guess I'm gonna put that on a bumper sticker. Since we are talking about coffee, just want to mention that Perk Coffee is finally going to open at Hosea and Second. That's been an interesting little
I saw that.
experiment in mixed use. They've had Greater Good, I think, barbecue come and go. They've had a couple of restaurants come and go, and the interesting thing there to me is they aren't like chain restaurants. They're in many cases really local. If they're a franchise at all, they're a local franchise. But you know, this shopping center up the road, Decatur Crossing. I mean, respectfully, that's a whole lot of mediocrity in terms of the food out there. It ain't great. There's Gusto is probably my favorite thing, and I think that's a local Atlanta chain, but the barbecue place, the City Barbecue, oh my God, that's a travesty. Like that just shouldn't. Like you call there and they put you on hold, and they're like, a barbecue specialist will be right with you. You're like, no, 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 no. No, it's only legit if you call and you hear somebody hacking the ribs with a cleaver in the back. You hear that sort of thing going on. But it's amazing to me that Hosea and Second has had such a hard time, and I don't know. I haven't looked at I say a hard time. I mean, they're doing okay. I mean, they're mixed use development. They've had some things that have been successful, but I haven't seen anything at Decatur Crossing close, and some of those restaurants are objectively bad and need to close. And I'm not going to name names besides you, City Barbecue, but there are a few of them. So how does that work? How does a mediocre restaurant do better than an independent, locally owned one? You know what I'm saying? Am I making
They
sense?
got more PPP money at this point to
Yeah,
then business. That's going to be another thing that when that money
right.
runs out, how are you going to keep employees on board?
Yeah,
Which again, I think we're
Right.
at that 8 week period. Most people have used those proceeds.
I know I have.
Yeah.
Definitely,
Hmm.
definitely. Me and Uncle Sam are tight after this. I'm doing more stuff with the government than I thought I would ever do. Well, listen, great show, y'all. At 7 o'clock, I'm gonna be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you. So somebody, Atlanta Nick says I'm legit addicted to chocolates, Kai Frappe. I hope you get some help for that. And no, listen, we appreciate y'all very much for joining us. If you're watching us, spread the word. We're going to be doing an economic episode every month. We're going to try to do a mental health episode every month. This Friday, we're going to have Mayor Pro Tem Tony Powers and Mayor Patty Garrett of the City of Decatur on the show. It'll be a fun show. Alex Brown, who is now handling the bulk of the Decatur city reporting, is going to join us. So if you're interested, and it's weird, we're a Decatur news website, but we haven't really had a Decatur specific news show yet. So this will be kind of cool, be kind of a first for us. So join us this Friday at 6. Crystal, Trey, thank you so much for joining us today. And we're going to sign off. We'll talk to you again on Friday, everybody. Have a good night.